It's over, and nothing now will save Labor's voice from a massive defeat. And this is all on the Prime Minister. Anthony Albanese backed this hopeless idea to divide Australians by race in its constitution. Now, Albanese then sold it in the worst possible way, and it's Albanese who has left the country angrier and more divided than ever. It's all on him. And even when this voice, the Aboriginal-only Advisory Parliament, goes down in the vote on October 14, it will be Anthony Albanese who voters will turn on. And here's a tip. If the Prime Minister does not instantly change the way he works, his leadership is almost certainly finished. It's finished unless he starts from today to think with his brain and not his heart, to give us less dream and more detail, and stop preaching and start listening. Because, Prime Minister, your ways no longer work. Like this crying, when you announced in March the wording of the voice question.
Not put this to a vote. So to not put this to a vote is to concede defeat.
Now that was actually a warning to voters. It wasn't really an appeal at all. Because here is a Prime Minister clearly in love with the dream and too emotionally involved to think rationally and practically about that dream even when it was dying in the polls even then. Then this last month, when Albanese announced the referendum date.
You're being asked to vote for an idea.
Now, to vote just for an idea, is that it, really? Vote for an idea and, just cope with not knowing how things will even work, how the voice will get chosen, what it will actually do, what problems it will then solve that we can't solve already. Here was Albanese confirming himself that we have to vote for a dream, not details. And that, I feel, is frightening. And Albanese even advertised in his speech, that same speech, the thing about his campaign that has so outraged so many Australians, the lecturing that we've been getting from the elites, from the big business bosses that Albanese signed up to bully us, the big sporting codes that he sort of queued up to convince us to vote yes.
Faith groups and sporting codes and local councils and businesses and unions have embraced it. Now, my fellow Australians, you can vote for it.
Yes, you common people, the elites have agreed with your Prime Minister. Now, all that's left for you to do is just sign on the dotted line. Don't ask for details, don't bother your little heads with that. I mean, how could any politician think that this was the way to sell the biggest change to our Constitution in our lives, to sell it to Australians who are notoriously resentful of lecturing and hectoring? How could you do that? Just say, oh, look, we've decided it. You just say yes to a change in our constitutions to divide Australians forever by their race, or at least the race of some of their ancestors. No more of this Australia that we grew up in, where we're all Australians together, regardless of where you come from, regardless of who your parents were. This would be a forever change to divide us by race. So how insane was that idea to even start with? And what a stupid, stupid way for Albanese to sell it. So no wonder it's crashed. Albanese started the year with almost two-thirds support in polls for his voice, but every poll since shows that the more Australians have heard about this voice, the more they hated it. And less perhaps for its lack of detail, although that counted, less for its lack of detail than because it will divide Australians by race. How often does it need to be said? Now, a news poll last week has the yes vote now cratering to 38%. with the no vote at 53 and undecided at 9. Well, the Redbridge poll last weekend was even worse for the yes campaign because it forced those undecideds to decide. And it found the way they broke was mainly to the no camp. So the yes vote was 39%, the no now 61. That is devastating. The voice is stone cold dead. And there's nothing left in Albanese's tank except tainted money that the corporates lavished on the Yes campaign to buy more of the ads that few people believe and many now resent. In fact, voters now hate that nagging and hate that bullying so much that the pro-Voice AFL, for instance, decided not to push the Voice at its grand final like Albanese was counting on. Woolworths had to pull pro-Voice ads from its Big W stores because even the staff were complaining. But just admitting the Voice is dead, it's not going to save Labor, because Albanese himself must change. I don't know if he could really do it, but, you know, if it's going to survive, that's what he must do. He's got to realise that his own arrogance and his own laziness helped to kill the Voice. Now, those same failings now even threaten to cripple the economy. Albanese's ambitious rivals are jostling for attention by designing devastating policies on their pet fields like global warming, like industrial relations, and the environment too, while Albanese jets around the world, not really paying attention to the details that turn every dream into a disaster if you're not careful. Incredibly, Albanese last week admitted he didn't even know his Transport Minister had blocked extra Qatar flights and kept airfares high to the benefit of Qantas, until Virgin's boss rang him days later when he was overseas. How could you expect this epically travelling Prime Minister to be in touch with events back in Australia? I mean, seriously. Well, with the Voice, Albanese's performance has been astonishing. He didn't compromise with the Liberals for a start. He instead led an advisory panel stacked with Aboriginal radicals, former Marxists, race baiters, push on him a model for the Voice that went for broke.
The wonderful thing about the Uluru Statement, the proposal for a Voice, this is the first step. It's a vital step, and it puts all the explanation behind it. Like, you know, pay the rent, for example. You know, how do we do that in a way that is transparent and that it actually sees reparation?
So this model that we're voting on is the one that activists told Albanese to run with. And it's no wonder they did, because this model would give the Voice, made up of 24 selected activists, no national vote, selected activists, selected by whom, the freedom to raise any issue they liked, from taxes to defence, anything, and then make representations, not merely give advice, make representations to every federal public servant even, from the Reserve Bank to the Army, plus, of course, Parliament, before any decision was made. And all these powers would be in the Constitution, so unelected judges, not our politicians, had the final say on how this would all work. The judges could even insist, we don't know, but they could insist that no decision be made by politicians or senior public servants or anyone really in the public service before the Voice has spoken. So this is actually huge. Yet there was Albanese telling us, oh, it's just a modest change. It's just a humble, gracious request. And when he said that, who could believe anything he said after that to sell the Voice? And then when he's asked for details on how it will all work, Albanese just asked for the voters' trust. It'll be decided later. Don't you worry. And to sell the Voice, he signed up the elites, corporate leaders, the big sporting codes, the union bosses, the celebrities, even absurdly signed up American basketball legend Shaquille O'Neal. Plus, wildly loathed Qantas boss Alan Joyce. And that, of course, naturally triggered a furious revolt from grassroots Australians. So here's what's going to happen. Come referendum day, October 14. Albanese is going to be savaged for forcing on us a hopelessly racist idea that simply incited more division, anger and resentment, exactly the opposite of what he said he was about. Many voters are going to blame him for wasting $360 million on this referendum, plus the best part of the past year of his time on his crazy crusade when Australians are struggling to even pay for their petrol or their groceries, their mortgages, their power bills. And Aboriginal activists who designed this toxic Voice, like Noel Pearson, will blame Albanese instead for not selling their poison. It'll be his fault, not theirs. And voters are going to question Albanese's other crusade on global warming. They'll see the same weakness in the Prime Minister. You know, the the emotive dreaming of a green future where your power bills fall, while in this real world, of course, your bills rise, your power starts to fail, and every green scheme just blows out. And Albanese will then be typecast as a man dazzled by his dreams, too lazy and bored with details to figure out how to make them work. A man of passions and not plans. In short, worse than Whitlam. You watch the polls sink for Albanese too. Oh dear. News just in. The latest polls confirm that's happening already. Voters are making that link between the Voice and the Prime Minister who tried to sell it. And this could get very ugly now for Albanese, but also for the country, because you wait. The last big excuse is still coming for the Yes campaign. Australians are all racists. That's why they said no. So all the more important that when we do vote no on October 14, make sure it is a massive no, an overwhelming no, so that, I don't know, maybe 65, 2/3 of Australians have voted no to this Voice, because who then would dare to say that 65% of Australians are racist? This has to be not just a win, but a crushing defeat for the No campaign. Please, God, for Australia, let that happen.